The photograph reached Seo-rin at 2:13 in the morning, taken from behind a row of hanging lotus lanterns outside a private gambling room in Itaewon. And the first thing she noticed was not the blood on the marble floor or the terrified casino manager kneeling beside a broken chip tray, but the way Min Do-jun had placed his black wool coat around a woman everyone else in that room had been ordered not to touch. The woman was African American, 31, full-figured and unmistakably plus size, more than 150 kilograms, with warm brown skin, soft cheeks, deep-set eyes that held too much intelligence to be mistaken for fear, and a torn sleeve where someone had grabbed her before the most dangerous man in Seoul stepped between her and the entire room. Do-jun, head of the Min Syndicate and owner of half the night businesses between Gangnam and Busan under cleaner names, did not protect strangers in public. He did not bend down to pick up another person's dropped glasses. He did not let his men see him angry unless he intended the anger to become policy. Yet in the picture, his left hand was under Nia Brooks's elbow, steadying her as if the room belonged to her now, while his right hand held the casino manager's ledger like a death sentence. Seo-rin sat in her glass apartment above Houndy Beach with a silk robe tied perfectly at her waist, her tablet propped against a cold cup of barley tea, and she enlarged the image until the pixels began to split. The woman's dress was cheap navy cotton, the kind issued to catering staff hired through subcontractors for illegal private events where rich men wanted food without witnesses, and her shoes were the flat black kind worn by women who had learned to survive 12-hour shifts with swollen ankles and no sympathy. That should have made Seo-rin dismiss her. Instead, she studied Nia's face with the attention of a woman trained from girlhood to recognize danger in rooms where men smiled too easily. Nia was not looking at Do-jun like a rescued victim. She was looking at the ledger in his hand, and even through the grain of the photograph, Seo-rin could see the calculation in her eyes. The second message arrived beneath the image with only 6 Korean characters. She was searching for this. By dawn, Seo-rin's private investigator had pulled a file thick enough to justify concern and dirty enough to become useful. Nia Brooks had entered Korea 7 months earlier on a language fellowship that did not explain why she had taken work in kitchens, laundries, and event halls connected to Min Syndicate properties. She had a graduate certificate in forensic accounting from Atlanta, an old eviction record tied to her mother's medical debt, and a father named Marcus Brooks who had died 17 years earlier inside a Korean detention facility after being convicted of laundering money for a shipping company that later vanished into a web of shell corporations. The case had been ugly, quiet, and convenient. Marcus had been a civilian logistics auditor attached to a U.S. Korean port operation in Incheon, and the evidence against him had rested on authorization codes, transfer slips, and a confession signed after 3 days without proper counsel. Seo-rin read until she reached the name of the company that had benefited from the stolen funds. Then she stopped moving. The company had belonged to her father before it was absorbed by a Min family front. The cream envelope was delivered to Min Do-jun's Hanamdong residence at 8:40 the next morning, passing through 2 security gates, a biometric scanner, and the hands of Park Tae-oh, Do-jun's most loyal lieutenant, whose face changed almost imperceptibly when he saw Seo-rin's seal pressed into the paper. Do-jun opened it alone in his upstairs office while rain crawled down the windows and Seoul moved below the hill like a machine that never admitted hunger. Inside were 9 pages, 1 photograph, and a short handwritten note that smelled faintly of expensive ink and old resentment. Seo-rin did not waste words telling him she knew about the woman. She told him she knew why Nia was in Korea, what ledger she had tried to steal from the casino, which prosecutor's widow had been asking questions about Marcus Brooks, and how easily an American woman with a criminal father, no powerful relatives in Seoul, and unexplained access to syndicate financial rooms could be made to look like a foreign thief planted by police. Do-jun read the note once with the stillness his men feared more than shouting, then a second time with his thumb resting over Nia's name. Seo-rin gave him 3 choices. He could remove Nia from Korea before the week ended and publicly announce his reconciliation with Seo-rin at her father's memorial gala. He could surrender the casino ledger and the Incheon archive key to Seo-rin's lawyers, allowing her family to burn whatever was left of the Brooks case before Nia found it. Or he could refuse and watch Nia be arrested on charges that would hold long enough to ruin her, whether or not they were true. At the bottom, Seo-rin had added one sentence by hand, the slant of the letters sharp enough to look cut into the paper. You always protect your empire first, do-jun, so do not embarrass yourself by pretending this woman is different. He should have called Nia immediately, but the instinct that had kept him alive through 15 years of Korean underworld politics moved faster than decency. He told himself that information had to be controlled before it could be shared, that Seo-rin's trap needed shape and weight before he dragged Nia into it, that a woman already carrying the ghost of her father's conviction did not need another threat placed in her hands before breakfast. Beneath those respectable reasons sat the uglier one. Do-jun had built his power on never needing anyone enough to be vulnerable to leverage, and the photograph had proved to Seo-rin what he had not admitted to himself. A woman hired to plate food in his casino had become the one person in Seoul whose pain could make him hesitate. Nia found out because Park Tae-oh made a mistake no loyal lieutenant should have made. He left the photocopy room unlocked for 30 seconds while answering a call from Busan. And when Nia stepped in carrying a tray of untouched coffee cups from Do-jun's office, she saw her father's mugshot under the copier light, his face washed pale by machine glare, his prison number printed beneath his name in a font she had hated since childhood. She did not cry. She set the tray down carefully beside the toner cartridges, took the top page, folded it once, and slid it into the waistband beneath her apron with the calm of a woman whose whole life had trained her not to collapse where enemies could measure the fall. By the time Do-jun came downstairs looking for her, she was already in the basement parking garage, standing beside his black Genesis with the copied page in one hand and his house archive key in the other. He saw the paper before he saw her face, and because he was not a foolish man, he knew the argument was already lost. Rainwater dripped from the concrete ceiling behind her. A security camera clicked softly as it turned. Nia's braided hair was tied back with a red scarf that had belonged to her mother, and the cheap soles of her catering shoes were wet from crossing the service courtyard. But nothing about her looked small. Her body filled the narrow space with a grounded, immovable dignity that made the armored car behind her seem like the less solid thing. When she spoke, her voice was low enough that the two guards by the elevator pretended not to hear. You opened a file on my dead father, met the woman who wants me destroyed, and decided the one person who didn't need the truth was me, she said, holding up the archive key until its brass teeth caught the garage light. So now you can either unlock the room where your family buried him, or you can watch me walk into Seo-rin's trap alone. So now you can either unlock the room where your family buried him, or you can watch me walk into Seo-rin's trap alone, Nia said, and Do-jun did not answer quickly because every answer available to him would reveal something he had spent half his life hiding. Either that his control had failed, that his family's name had been dirtier than even his enemies claimed, or that the woman standing in front of him with rain on her scarf and fury in her hands had already become more important than the rules that built him. The guards waited for a command. Park Tae-oh stood near the elevator with his jaw tight, one hand inside his suit jacket as if violence might solve the shame in the room. Do-jun lifted two fingers, not toward Nia, but toward his own men, and the order was understood at once. The garage emptied. When the elevator doors closed, Nia was still holding the key, and Do-jun was looking at it as if she had taken it from his pocket instead of from the life he had tried to manage around her. The archive was not beneath the mansion, as Nia had expected, but under a shuttered herbal medicine clinic in Jongno that had belonged to the Min family before the syndicate learned to wear corporate suits. Do-jun drove himself, an act that unsettled his security detail more than any threat, while Nia sat in the passenger seat with her knees angled carefully because the car had not been made for a woman her size, and because she refused to perform discomfort for a man who already owed her too much. A paper bag of pharmacy receipts lay between them, used to hide the archive key when they crossed the bridge, and the heater clicked with a dry sound that filled the silence whenever Seoul traffic forced them to stop. Do-jun tried once to explain that Seo-rin had enough influence to move police, prosecutors, and airport immigration before lunch. Nia kept her eyes on the windshield and said that men with influence had been moving her family around like furniture since she was 14, so he would need a better reason than fear if he wanted her to sit still. The clinic smelled of dust, ginseng, and the sour trace of rain trapped in old wood. Behind a cabinet of porcelain herb jars, Do-jun pressed his thumb against a reader that should not have existed in a closed business, and a steel door opened into a narrow stairwell lit by emergency bulbs. Nia descended slowly, one hand on the rail, feeling the building's age in the steps and the ache in her hips from a day that had begun with betrayal and had not yet offered mercy. The underground room held metal cabinets, sealed boxes, ledger books, and the paper memory of a criminal empire that had survived by writing down only what could be useful later. Do-jun went first to a cabinet marked with shipping affiliates from 2008 through 2011, but Nia did not follow him. She stood under the humming light, listening to the air system rattle above them, then moved toward a lower drawer labeled Charitable Foundations. Do-jun turned when he heard the drawer open. "That is not the port file," he said, and Nia pulled out a folder with a faded sticker from a children's hospital fundraiser, the kind of harmless label made precisely to discourage men like him from looking twice. She laid it on the table, opened the first page, and showed him a transfer slip routed through 3 accounts before landing in a foundation controlled by Seo-rin's father. "My mother kept copies of every hospital bill after my father died," Nia said, smoothing the page with fingers that did not shake. The month he was arrested, an anonymous donation paid the prison medical unit to transfer him away from Seoul National Hospital and into a detention clinic with no cardiac specialist. I thought it was cruelty. Then I noticed the donor code matched a foundation name I saw on a casino invoice last week." Do-jun looked from the slip to her face, and for the first time since she had known him, the silence around him did not feel controlled. It felt broken. They worked for 9 hours without food, surrounded by the small, brutal objects that make old crimes real. A stapled customs receipt with a coffee ring over the date, a cassette tape from a port security office, a cracked USB drive wrapped in a rubber band, and a handwritten visitor log showing that Seo-rin's father had met Marcus Brooks 2 days before the confession was signed. The first twist came from the tape. It did not show Marcus stealing money. It showed him refusing to sign a transfer order while a younger Park Tae-oh stood outside the room as a bodyguard for the Min family, visible for 12 seconds in the corner reflection of the glass. Nia replayed those 12 seconds 3 times, not because she needed proof that Tae-oh had been there, but because Do-jun did. The man who controlled Do-jun's doors, cars, weapons, and private rooms had been close enough to the original frame-up to smell the ink drying. Do-jun called Tae-oh from the clinic office and put the phone on speaker. His voice was mild, which made the question more dangerous. He asked where Tae-oh had been on August 19, 2009, and the pause on the line lasted half a second too long before the older man said he had been in Ulsan handling a debt dispute. Nia wrote Ulsan on the back of a receipt, circled it, and pushed the paper toward Do-jun beside the visitor log. Do-jun stared at the circle, his face emptied of every expression except the one that made men disappear from rooms. He did not accuse Tae-oh. He thanked him, ended the call, and set the phone down on the desk with care. Nia expected anger. Instead, he reached for the next file, because some betrayals are too large to touch until the proof has enough weight to survive the first denial. At 4:30 in the morning, the archive door alarm blinked red. Do-jun's security system should have recognized only his access and Tae-oh's emergency override, but the monitor near the stairwell showed 3 police vans stopping outside the closed clinic, their lights off, their doors opening without sirens. Seo-rin had moved faster than either of them expected, and she had not sent thugs because thugs could be denied. She had sent a financial crimes unit with a warrant already signed, probably by a prosecutor whose career owed too much to her father's old circle. Do-jun shut off the table lamp. Nia gathered the cassette, the visitor log, and the foundation slip, but the cracked USB drive slipped from the folder and skidded beneath a cabinet. She went down on one knee to reach it, her breath catching from the sudden movement, and Do-jun moved to help. She shook him off, not out of pride, but because his body in the stairwell would be worth more than hers if the police entered first. The back exit led into an alley behind the clinic, but the old door had warped from years of damp weather and would not open fully. Do-jun slammed his shoulder into it once, twice, and on the third attempt the wood split enough for cold air to rush in. Nia turned sideways, pressing the files against her chest, forcing her body through a gap that scraped paint dust across her coat and bruised her upper arm against the frame. Behind them, boots hit the stairs. A man shouted do-jun's name. The alley smelled of wet cardboard and frying oil from a 24-hour snack stall at the corner. Ordinary life continuing a few meters from a trap designed to erase 17 years of truth. Do-jun took Nia's hand only long enough to pull her past a delivery scooter, then released it because she did not need dragging. She needed time. They reached the mouth of the alley as a black sedan rolled to the curb and Park Tae-oh stepped out holding Do-jun's spare phone, the one that should have been locked in the mansion safe. His face carried no panic, only the tired respect of a man finally showing the blade he had kept under his sleeve for too long. "Give me the files, boss," Tae-oh said, using the title like an apology and a threat at the same time. Nia saw the police lights bloom blue against the clinic windows behind them, saw Do-jun's hand move toward the inside of his coat, and saw Seo-rin's message arrive on the stolen phone in Tae-oh's hand, the screen bright enough for all three of them to read. "If she leaves that alley with the ledger, Marcus Brooks dies guilty forever. If she leaves that alley with the ledger, Marcus Brooks dies guilty forever," the message said, and Nia looked at those words on the stolen phone with the strange calm that comes when fear has finally spent all its easy tricks. Park Tae-oh kept one hand inside his coat, not yet drawing the weapon Nia knew he carried, while Do-jun stood between them with rain darkening the shoulders of his suit and 17 years of inherited rot opening under his feet. The mistake Tae-oh made was assuming Nia would protect the files by hiding them. She had been raised by a mother who paid medical debt in envelopes, fought eviction notices with certified mail, and taught her daughter that paper was safest when more than one honest person had already seen it. Nia reached into her coat, pulled out the cracked USB drive, and dropped it through the open window of the delivery scooter beside her, where the driver, a gray-haired woman with a helmet too large for her head, caught it in her gloved palm and rode into traffic before any man in the alley understood she had been waiting there all night. Tae-oh's face changed first, and that was how Do-jun knew the betrayal was older than fear. The police reached the alley seconds later, but the lead detective did not rush forward because half the night market had turned toward the commotion, phones lifted beneath plastic umbrellas, and the worst place to stage a false arrest was suddenly in front of 50 witnesses and a woman from the snack stall yelling that she had seen everything. Do-jun used the crowd the way men in his world use knives. He stepped back from Tae-oh, raised both hands where everyone could see them, and told the detective that the evidence Seo-rin's people wanted was already being delivered to 3 locations: a civil rights attorney in Atlanta, a corruption reporter in Seoul, and the widow of the prison doctor who had signed Marcus Brooks's transfer papers. The detective looked at Tae-oh then, not at Nia, because official lies begin to weaken the moment they require too many people to pretend at once. The delivery rider's real name was Mrs. O, and Nia had met her 4 weeks earlier behind the casino kitchen when the older woman brought seaweed rolls for staff who were never invited to eat what they served. Her son had worked port security in 2009 and died in a hit-and-run 2 months after giving Marcus Brooks a copy of a shipping discrepancy report. That was the first thread Nia had found in Korea, not do-jun, not the casino, not even the ledger, but a mother with a delivery route, a locked tin of old documents, and a grief so disciplined it looked like routine. Mrs. O rode the USB to a copy shop near Yoljuro, where a law student scanned it into 6 encrypted emails, each scheduled to send if he failed to enter a password every 10 minutes. Seo-rin had built her trap around one frightened foreign woman. Nia had built her answer around overlooked people who had spent years being treated as furniture in rooms where crimes were planned. By sunrise, the first article was online, and it did not read like gossip. It read like architecture: transfer codes, foundation donations, prison medical records, the shipping discrepancy report, the visitor log, the 12 seconds of tape showing Tae-oh outside the room where Marcus had been cornered, and the recovered message from Seo-rin threatening to preserve a dead man's guilt were arranged with the kind of patient brutality that leaves no useful shadow for denial. Seo-rin's father, Han Myung-jae, had not merely benefited from the stolen port money. He had used Min family muscle to force Marcus into signing a confession, then used a charitable foundation to move him into a medical facility where his worsening heart condition could be neglected without witnesses. Tae-oh had been paid twice, once in cash and once with power, and he had remained beside do-jun for years because guilt is easier to manage when it stands close enough to control the evidence. Do-jun did not kill Teo, though every old rule in his world expected it. He handed him to the prosecutor with the tape, the visitor log, and a recorded confession extracted not by fists, but by something crueler to a proud man. Do-jun let Teo believe for 3 minutes that Seo-rin had already blamed him for everything. Teo, who had survived knives, raids, betrayals, and winters in rooms without heat, broke at the thought of being discarded as a servant after spending half his life pretending to be family. His statement opened the sealed chamber Seo-rin had protected. Her father's memorial gala, planned as the stage for do-jun's public surrender, became the room where investigators arrived with warrants while cameras from 3 financial networks waited outside beneath the hotel awning. Seo-rin stood in a black dress beside a wall of white chrysanthemums, her face perfect, her hands empty, while the portrait of her father looked down on a crowd that finally understood mourning had been used as camouflage. Nia attended because Seo-rin had sent her an invitation as an insult 2 days earlier, and because some insults are worth returning in person. She wore a deep burgundy hanbok-inspired evening coat tailored by a seamstress in Itaewon who had measured her body without apology, building the garment for her actual shape instead of punishing her for it. Her braids were pinned with small gold clips from her mother's jewelry box, and when she entered the hotel ballroom, the old men near the donor wall looked first at her size, then at her skin, then at do-jun standing beside her, and finally at the cameras turning toward them. Seo-rin crossed the room with a champagne flute she did not drink from. "You think this makes you clean?" she asked do-jun, but Nia answered before he could, not loudly, not theatrically, just clearly enough that the nearest microphone caught every word. "No, it makes the record harder to bury." The legal punishment came in pieces because real justice rarely arrives with the neatness stories promise. Han Myung-jae's estate was frozen pending criminal asset recovery. Seo-rin was charged with obstruction, witness intimidation, and conspiracy tied to the attempted destruction of evidence. Teo entered protective custody after naming 2 prosecutors, 1 police captain, and 3 shell companies that had survived under charitable language for too long. Marcus Brooks's conviction was not erased that day, but the court accepted an emergency petition to reopen the case, and Nia stood on the courthouse steps with rain tapping the shoulders of her burgundy coat while her mother listened through a video call from Atlanta, one hand pressed over her mouth as a Korean attorney said Marcus's name without lowering his voice. Do-jun stood behind Nia rather than beside her, a choice small enough for cameras to miss and large enough for her to feel. He had learned, late but not too late, that protection was not the same thing as possession. Weeks later, after the court vacated Marcus Brooks's conviction and the Port Authority issued the kind of formal apology that uses careful language because shame has lawyers, Nia returned to the Jongno clinic alone. Do-jun found her there near midnight, sitting on the floor of the archive room with an open cardboard box, sorting copies into labeled folders with a paper cup of convenience store coffee gone cold beside her knee. The room no longer felt like a grave. It felt like a place that had been forced to give back what it stole. He did not ask if she was all right, because she hated questions that expected a clean answer. He set down a small brass nameplate instead, newly engraved in Korean and English. Marcus Brooks Memorial Fund for Wrongfully Accused Workers. Nia touched the edge of it with 2 fingers, tracing her father's name as if the letters needed proof of being real, then looked up at do-jun with eyes tired enough to be honest. He did not offer a ring in that room, and that was one of the reasons she trusted what came next. He offered keys. 1 opened the clinic archive, 1 opened an office in the legal foundation he had funded but placed under her control, and the last opened the front gate of the Hannum house, where her name had been added to the resident registry only after she agreed to it in writing and made his lawyer remove 3 insulting clauses about security supervision. "I am not asking you to disappear into my life," do-jun said, his voice low in the stale archive air, his hands open on the table where so much damage had been counted. "I am asking whether I may build something beside yours." Nia looked at the keys, at the folders, at the nameplate, and at the man who had once tried to protect her by withholding the truth, then learned the harder skill of standing still while she chose for herself. Outside, Seoul was waking into winter, delivery trucks grinding through narrow streets. temple bells sounding somewhere beyond the rooftops, steam rising from food stalls where workers warmed their hands around paper cups before another long day inside systems that rarely remembered their names. Nia took the archive key first, then the office key, and only after a long moment did she take the house key, not as surrender, not as fantasy, not as payment for pain, but as a decision made by a woman who had crossed an ocean to clear a dead man's name and found, inconveniently and against every practical instinct, a living man willing to be changed by the truth. Do-jun closed his hand around nothing, letting her hold all 3 keys herself, and in that restraint she saw the apology repeated more clearly than words. When they climbed the stairs together, the clinic door opened onto a pale morning, and for the first time since Nia had landed in Korea, the city ahead did not look like enemy territory. It looked unfinished, which was different and better.